All right, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Gordon Erlebacher.
I can't stop before the applause. I mean, obviously. Okay, so when we started the conference, right, the idea was that the various speakers would discuss how AI was used in their research, and of course, it didn't quite work out that way. But I think it was a great set of presentations, and we stayed on time, which is quite unusual. Okay, but I'm going to stick with the theme. So when ChatGPT first came out in November, I found out about it shortly after, and then I decided, well, it's time to stop doing research and start playing. My chair's there. I hadn't noticed. Okay, so I'm going to discuss the way I use various tools. Okay, so of course I try to see how far they can be used, but I actually use them in my daily work, and then I exchange my finding with a select number of researchers. Okay, so here listed are the tools that I mostly use. So Grammarly, most people know. Okay, so I've been using that, but these days it uses AI. And then I realized that a lot of tools existed based on ChatGPT, on GPT-3, which was a precursor to ChatGPT. And there were just way too many tools like Jarvis and many others, and I didn't know what to choose, nor that I want to pay. But then one day I decided to kind of limit my search, and I started searching for tools that related specifically to academics. So I started doing a search combined with the word Latex, and I came across Writefull, which is merged with Overleaf. It works within Overleaf, and I think most of you, faculty and students, use Overleaf, which uses Latex. Okay, so I want to discuss Writefull in a little detail. And then I came across Quillbot, which is a paraphraser. So if you want to cheat the AI plagiarizer, you need paraphrases, right? And okay, so that's on the writing side. And then you've got the coding side. Okay, so I use a Visual Studio Code. That's currently probably the best IDE out there. And so I'll discuss a little bit about Copilot. So Copilot is an extension of auto-completion. And then I'll discuss at the end ChatGPT and GPT-4. I mean, we all know the basic use cases, an extended version of Siri, Alexa, and Google Home, right? A lot of people use it for that. They just ask questions. But however, the uses go way beyond that. So if you read the technical papers, you can do things that you probably haven't thought about. Okay, so having said that, okay, so Grammarly, I'm not going to go into any kind of detail. So it's existed for at least a decade, and it checks grammar, and it's become quite good. If you get the professional version, it will completely restructure your sentences, and you can specify whether you want formal writing, fluent writing, fiction writing, and you can specify sentiment. And so you've got a lot of control. And of course, a lot of people criticize Grammarly for making suggestions which it should not make, like people who want to be creative in their writing. However, if you go through the effort and make changes so it does not flag anything, you'll find that your writing will improve. So even if I don't agree with the suggestions, I often go through the effort of changing the language so that it passes Grammarly, and my English typically improves. Okay, so, and as usual, all tools can be good. We said already, all tools can be, technology can be good, be used for good or for bad. And the same thing is true for all these tools. You can use them intelligently or not. Okay, so you got to make use of them to your advantage. Okay, so Overleaf plus Grammarly plus Writefull. So Writefull is integrated into Overleaf, and you can see here at the top these various icons. So I could do real-time demos, but I realized that if I do this, time will pass too fast. So if I have time at the end, we could go back to do demos if people are interested. Okay, so I will go through some tools. Let's see now. Okay, so at the start, it would do the same thing Grammarly does. This is like a section of a text inside Overleaf, and you will see two types of underlines. One type is like the words, whatever's under the word sense. That's a Grammarly indicator, and then you got the solid red. That's a Writefull indicator. So if I click here, right. So on Grammarly, this is what you would see. We've all seen this. It will basically fix the correction. You got a choice of accepting it or dismissing it. And here you will see a Writefull. Now, Writefull is an AI. I'm not quite sure if it's a fine-tuned version of GPT-X. I mean, I really have no idea. But it's based on millions of academic papers. So the training set itself is millions of academic papers. So if that's what you want to do, I mean, using ChatGPT everything's mixed together. So if you want to get the academic version, you've got to prompt it in such ways that you restrict the search to academic papers, which you can do. Okay, so if you look here, you will see the two choices, reduce their burden versus reducing the burden for them, and you will see percentages. So it tells you what the percentages are of these particular constructs in the millions of papers it's actually scanned. And so that gives you an indication of how useful the sentence is, or whether it's popular, whether it's popular or not. So you could always choose the one which has the highest percentage, or if you're sure of yourself, you could choose the other. Okay, then you've got this tool called Academizer. So if you feed in a sentence, which is a colloquial sentence, the way we normally write or the way students might write, okay, you can transform it to something which is academic, which sounds more academic, which is very useful. So for instance, I invented the sentence where I said, my code makes many plots of strain versus, makes many plots of stress versus strain. So the word makes is not a good word. Why? Because it's got too many definitions. It's not sufficiently precise, right? Academic writing, we like precision. So if you pass it through the Academizer, I get my code is used to create many plots of stress versus strain, which I consider it's more academic, and academics write like that. But for me, I don't like using the word used, okay? And I don't like the passive tense. Okay, so of course you can get other versions. You can just run it again. My code generates many plots of stress versus strain, which I think is a good sentence. Generates it's an active, in the passive has been removed. But okay, but if you understand how to use GPT, you can get to these kind of results faster. And then this is like a third case. Okay, so the Writefull has got a very useful tool which goes beyond restructuring text, and that is a language search tool. So like oftentimes when you're writing, you may hesitate between two forms, right? So before these tools came to be, I would go to Google and I would say, how does one use one word versus the other? I would say X versus Y usage, and then you can go to a site and it gives you examples. But here it's all built in. So for instance, okay, so I'm going to show you, these are various abbreviations you can use, and I'm going to show you. So like if you use the underscore, you can see the little square on top. Okay, in this underscore, different reports and documents have indicated the need for investing in technologies. It will give you, based on its own database, it will give you all the different cases it finds, or at least the most prominent ones. And so you will see that 21% of the time it says in this context, different reports and documents. And you can see a whole set of variations, and then you can pick and choose. So this is a form of creativity because it will give you choices that you may not have thought of, but which may actually be better suited. And these words are not necessarily synonyms. If I want to use synonyms, I can put the word sense between asterisks. And now I'll get a whole series of synonyms and how it's used, and I will get percentages. So you will get to see how the different people who write journal articles use these different sentences. So it's a very useful thing because over time, you will actually improve your own language, hopefully, right? And then you could do alternative words. So for instance, at the top, you'll see in this sense/spirit, right? And so that basically says, should I use the word sense or should I use the word spirit? Sometimes you hesitate, right? And so here you will see that you should use the word sense in these various sentences. The word sense is being used 96% of the time. And so sense is more likely the one you should use. On the other hand, for creative writing, you may want to go the other route, but that's up to you to make a conscious decision. Okay, then you got, and this is good for students or people who are not used to writing, right? So we know that when we write academic papers, you have these different sections. So on the first column, you'll see abstract, introduction, literature, methods, etc. Those are all the different sections that you might find in a paper on biology, for instance. And then on the second column, you will see, taking the case of literature, you will see a series of possibilities, right? You could be discussing the literature from different points of view. You could be discussing a knowledge gap. You could be discussing positive reviews, negative reviews. You could be describing an author focusing on something. You could be discussing disagreements, quotes, or whatever, okay? And for every one of these, on the right column, it will actually give you a series of sentences that would apply to that particular category. So if you look at the left, you got maybe 10 choices. Then you got 10 choices in the second column, 10 times 10 times 20. That gives you 2,000 various combinations. So for the student or for the faculty who's got difficulty finding words or variations or different ways of saying things, this is a very quick way, of getting information. So as far as academic tools go, I find it fantastic. Okay, so the paraphraser, this is really, it's not integrated into Overleaf. I sent them a message, told them to integrate it. But oftentimes you see a sentence and that it's not quite right, but then you cannot find a way to say it. Right? That happens a lot. And so what you can do, okay, I'll go there. Okay, so here you can see a paraphraser. So you could say anything. What is the weather in Tallahassee? Point to be in the next several days. Okay, and then now you can paraphrase this. And say, what will the weather be like in Tallahassee over the next few days? Okay, so you can see it's different. And what's interesting here, you've got a synonym bar, which you could change, and that controls the number of words which are likely to be changed. Okay, so if I rerun it, it will basically increase the level, the number of words that will be substituted. Now, of course, I should be entering really a paragraph, not just a sentence. Okay, the more you enter, the more the context is, the better the results will be. It is using AI in some way. And then you've got these various choices. Like you could discuss, I could say, I wanted to rephrase, but I wanted to make it formal. How will the weather in Tallahassee be over the next few days? I could say I can be creative. How will the weather in Tallahassee be over the next several days? And then there's a mode called custom, and then you got various additional options for control. So not only can you paraphrase, but you can actually control the way you paraphrase. So that can be very useful for a variety of use cases. My general rule is that I like to have multiple tools, not that I need them all at any given time, but I want to make sure that whenever I need it, it's instantaneously. Same thing with books, same thing with everything. Okay, so this is just an example of Quillbot on a larger section, right? And so you could see on the right, you can see which words have been changed by the coloring. And if you click on any word, you can actually see a list of synonyms and alternatives for the word. So not only can you get the paraphrasing, but then you can get alternatives for specific sections. You may say, oh, I don't like quite that word. So when so the keynote introduction I did this morning, I put bioinformation into GPT, it generated the intro for me, and then I edited it and I did some paraphrasing with Quillbot. So I use all these tools, and it's quite unlikely that a plagiarizer would have detected it. But I put in the work. That's not much different from doing the writing yourself, in my opinion. Okay, so I'm confusing my talk with the real deal. Okay, so now let's switch to Visual Studio Code. Okay, so like I said, I consider it to be the best IDE. I used to use Atom, and then there's Eclipse, and there's a whole bunch of others. But Visual Studio Code probably has the largest collection of plugins or extensions at the moment, and it's in total development. And Microsoft is actively involved in this development at the moment. And you know that Microsoft is putting AI tools now, the ChatGPT class tools, in all its products. So Microsoft is really taking the lead right now. It's working with OpenAI. So it's not to be discounted anymore. It was pretty lagging a decade. Okay, so among the extensions is Copilot. So if you have not used Copilot, you should use it. And it's free for students and faculty. Okay, otherwise it costs $10 a month. And then there's an AI extension that came out recently called Genie AI, which is an interface to ChatGPT, right? And for that, you've got to pay, because what you're basically doing is you're paying for to use the OpenAI API. Okay, so you're using the API, so you're paying, but the price is very cheap. It's like 0.002 of a dollar per 1,000 tokens. So, a page is like, let's say 1,000 tokens. So that's a lot of, it's very cheap. But if you abuse it, you pay. So you're not likely to abuse it for long. Okay, so Copilot. Okay, so Copilot is a coding assistant, right? So we all used to IntelliSense, right? We all used to command completion. But here, It's far more than that. I mean, it's scary at times, right? I mean, if you write code using good coding practices and you use your variables names intelligently and you write structured code, okay, and remembering that Copilot is based on some version of GPT-X that's trained on millions of code data, right? And hopefully on good code data. If you write similar to the code data is trained on, you're going to get good results. So if you write X equals 3 plus, X equals Y plus Z, and then you type carriage return, it's likely to type X1 equals Y1 plus something, even though you have not said anything. It's likely to do that. Okay. So for best results, you want to write good code, right? And you can also write comments. If you comment your code and you write descriptive, intelligent comments, you will get far better results from Copilot to the point where you can write complete classes and functions, etc. And so I'm going to show you, not in real time, because, if you do it real time, it's not going to work the one time you want it to work. But I had this idea, following the transformer technology on which GPT is based, that actually in parallel, take a function X and pass it through two different activation functions, like in this case, a sigma and a ReLU, combine them at the end and go to Y, and that would be a block, and then I would combine the block to do more complicated things. That's not unlike a multi-head channel, a multi-head attention system, for those who know. And so I basically wanted to construct this layer. Right, so these are the Copilot instructions. Inside Visual Studio, this is what I typed. I mean, this is literally what I typed. I said, create a module with multiple activations. Input is X, which branches off to two activations, which are then recombined. The recombination is done by a linear layer. That's all I wrote. Okay, it helps if you type fast. Okay, and this is what it created. Okay, you can see my instructions. Boom, it created what followed. Oftentimes, if you start typing the function, in this case, the instructions were good enough, it gave me the class. But if it doesn't give you the class, you just type the function name you want, and that together with the instructions is good enough to do it. I mean, really, it worked on the first shot. It was amazing. Okay, now Genie AI, that is an extension based on ChatGPT. So it's a plugin, and it costs, and you got to use the API. What's interesting is that you can control which API you use. So we hear about ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 4. However, there's many more APIs you can use. There's a whole range of language APIs, and the cost can go from 2 cents all the way up to 10 or 100 times more, depending on the quality you want and depending on what you use. Okay, but among the features, you can basically select code and you can say, find the bug. And sometimes it finds it, and these tools are going to improve in time. There's tools out there right now, not this tool, but there are tools out there where you can take a selection of code and say, transform it to Java. And it will translate from one language to another. It may have some errors. You can, you can optimize the code. And none of this stuff is foolproof. But if you're thinking and criticizing the systems on the grounds that they're making errors, you're making a serious error. Because whatever the errors are today, they're going to go down in time. Just as OCR, optical character recognition, the errors went down in time, and now people don't talk about it anymore. But all the disadvantages that people complain about now happened when there was optical character recognition. Oh, it's only 9%, 99% accurate. People were complaining. But people don't complain anymore. And the same thing is going to happen. Within 2 years, whatever errors occur now are going to mostly be gone, in my opinion. And that's why, as far as the panel goes, all these discussions about creating regulations based on the current version of ChatGPT, you're already behind the times. They should be doing regulations for what's going to happen in 3 years, not for what's happening today. There's no way they can catch up. Possible. Okay. So now let's go to ChatGPT, and that will finish the presentation. Okay. So this is the standard ChatGPT interface. And if you pay $20 a month, which some of us do, you got access to ChatGPT 4, which I've been using for a couple of months now, and that gets controlled in this box above. Okay, so let's see at some applications. Okay, so aside from the fact that you can do poetry and multiple languages and jokes and all kind of stuff, and it's incredible. And so here, the same thing that I did with the Academizer, I just basically put a sentence in order to model the processes of an organization, it is needed communication between several departments and sections. And I simply said, rephrase it, and it just did it. And I said, rephrase into academic language, and it did rather well. And this is a version of with ChatGPT 4, and it sounds quite academic. To accurately represent the procedural dynamics within an organization, interdepartmental and cross-sectional communication is essential. That's actually better than bland, in my opinion. Okay. No grammatical errors. However, the last sentence is in the passive tense. So when you're using ChatGPT, you got to understand that you can continue the conversation and it remembers what you talked about before up to the point it hallucinates. If you talk too long, you may end up getting divorced as a consequence, as we've read. Okay, so I simply wrote rephrase in the active tense, which it didn't quite do because I see it says cross-sectional communication is essential. Well, that's kind of correct. But I said is essential is passive. I'm not sure it's true. So then it says, in order to accurately represent the procedural dynamics within an organization, one must actively engage in interdepartmental and cross-sectional communication. Okay, perfect from my point of view. And the words are direct, they're active tenses, no passive tense, but that's satisfactory to me. So it goes pretty fast. So then when I did this, and I don't have a demonstration, I realized that I could just take students writing, which sometimes is not good. Okay, and you can just take students writing whatever the ethnicity of the student, and you just basically you pass it through ChatGPT or GPT-4, and you simply say remove all grammar errors, but don't change the semantics, and you get the version of your text without grammar errors, and that works. I've tried it out. Okay, so it's a very effective way, like passing an iron over your text. Okay, so plot text with a LaTeX table. So look at on the left, right? I get this right out of Overleaf. That is this LaTeX, and you can see in there a LaTeX table. Inside here, there's a LaTeX table, right? And so I said at the top, you could see my question. Extract information from the included LaTeX table and create a plot that includes information from all columns. You can also create two plots if that's clearer. I'm giving it a choice. The table is as follows. I'm telling you give it sometimes that works, and maybe I'm deluding myself. I don't know, but placebos also sometimes work. Okay, so there's no difference really. Okay, so on the right is basically what it created for me. Somehow it knows I want Python, but okay. So on the right, you see the code on the right. I did it. No, it's still there. Signal's gone. Okay. Anyway, then if I click again, you can see the plot it generated. This code generates that plot on the first shot. Okay. It was pretty good. So keep in mind that it extracted the table information from the LaTeX file, from the LaTeX table. I also did experiments, which I'm not going to show you, where I basically had it extract information from a LaTeX table and produce an XML file. And it did that as well. Right table. It's no different than translating from one language to another, if you come right down to it. Not much different. Okay, now more interesting. Anybody know what the K epsilon equation is in turbulence modeling? No? Okay. Anyway, so you take Navier-Stokes, you can do Reynolds average, you could do large eddy simulation, you can do K epsilon. K epsilon basically models kinetic energy and dissipation energy as a function of large scales. Okay, for those in the know. Okay, so here's my statement. Generate a standalone LaTeX file that contains the K epsilon equation for incompressible turbulence and a shear flow. I mean, really, think about that for a second, right? And so, okay, none of you can answer, correct? So it's already surpassed human capability. Okay, so here's the LaTeX file. I mean, here's what it generated, right? Generated the equations. You know what? I should generated the equations, okay? And then, but if you look at the equations, you can see, I don't want to click on it, but you can see /frac / partial rho K partial T, right? And so it becomes very heavy because a lot of partial derivatives. So I said, my next question, I said, simplify the equations. I defined the macro for partial derivative as, and I defined the macro. And then I said, rewrite the LaTeX you generated using this macro to simplify the form of the equations. Now think about this. This is substantially more complicated than what sentence completion or word prediction is, right? I mean, people talk about word prediction. They're deluding themselves. This is beyond word prediction. There's no way this is word prediction. Impossible. No, because ChatGPT has been post-trained using reinforcement learning. I know, but still. Okay, and look what it generated. I put in blue the macros that it put in there. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I'm not saying it substituted it, regenerated it, but it still must have used the previous result to get this. Okay, and this is the result in overleaf. I just took this result, stuck it in overleaf, and this is what I got. And then on the next page, this is the result I get with the same process going on in GPT-4. Okay, beautiful. I mean, really, as far as saving time, this is pretty good, right? And even if you don't have the exact equation you have, you've got a very good starting point. Okay, now priming. I haven't discussed that yet. Yep. Say that again? Oh, to run the simulation? No, that's something else I'm going to try. But if I can't do it today, I will do it next year. I mean, really, compared to what it's done already, that's trivial. Compared to this, this is the complicated part, in my opinion. Remember, Nathan, 3-4 years ago, we discussed this kind of stuff, right? Hypothetically. Okay, anyway. So here's my question, without priming. Okay, so priming means giving additional information to the chatbot, give it context in order for it to make more intelligent answers. So I write a set of bullet points on writing style identification via machine learning. You see, if Joey was here, who's my student working on styling, this would help him, but he's not here. Okay, so if I click on share, for those who use ChatGPT-4, there's something called Share GPT, which if you run on Chrome, allows you to create a link to whatever your conversation is, much more efficient for sharing. Okay, and so you can see here, it provides me a list. Lexical features, word frequency, syntactic features. Okay, this is the list. Okay, and it's all perfectly valid. But if I go back now, and for ChatGPT-4 with priming now, I'm researching different approach to identifying writing style using machine learning techniques. Style represents writing characteristics, which includes types of words, use of grammar, use of punctuation, and the choice of particular words and sentiment. What are the different approaches of style detection that have been employed? Present the results as a list of bullet points suitable to a presentation, right? That's priming. And then there's a conversation going on, right? So I'm just giving you the prompts. I'll show you the conversation in a minute. Provide references that support the above list. Now, ChatGPT-3, it's been reported when they give citations, it invents them. ChatGPT-4, they're 90% correct and real. Okay, so asking for citations with GPT-4 is a thing which can really help you. Then it gave me references which were old. And I said, provide another set of references as recent as possible, but not beyond 2021. I did that so it didn't have to print out the disclaimer at the beginning saying you couldn't do it, okay? And then I said, please provide these last references in BibTeX format, APA style. Well, APA style doesn't mean anything, but BibTeX format. And then I go to the conversation, and here is the list now compared to the previous list. Look, stylometric analysis, n-grams. I didn't say anything about n-grams, right? And then term frequency, inverse document frequency with sub-bullets, auto speech tagging. I mean, this is excellent. This is infinitely better than the previous one. And then here, I get a bunch of references. Look, 1998, 54. And then I ask for more recent references. 2017, 2003. Okay, that's not good. 2016, 2015. I mean, this is pretty good. And then I asked for BibTeX reference. I asked them for more than BibTeX. I mean, it's impressive, really. Right? I mean, this is infinitely beyond the standard usage. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so answers are very well structured. Priming is essential. You have to prime. Okay, now neural network. Now, without using Copilot, I'm going to basically do the same network I did before that I showed you. And now I said, construct a neural network using Torch that computes the following. I just put the formulas, which are in Latex, and if I come here, it actually generated the code and the code works, I mean, perfectly fine. Well, yeah, right. But I want to put some fluid Navier-Stokes equation and see what it does. Like, that's a good example. Yeah. Okay. Now you can put step-by-step prompting. So we're going to do something more complicated, right? So this is my instruction now. And you can see with the two different colors, I basically put each step, two different steps on two different colors, right? So that way you could see one step following the other, right? So I want the same neural network. Then I say, call a layer block normalization before this block, connect the input of the block to the output using a residual connection, call this block inner block. create an outer block, blah, 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 train the network with the Atom Optimizer for 1,000 epochs. The Python code should use torch. I mean, that's a pretty specific set of instructions, right? And then, and so for the most part, it did it. Look at that. Inner block, forward. There's a residual, the residual network is there. Outer block, forward. Oh, okay, fine. Anyway, the network basically constructed from the blocks. Here I've got basically various parameters, two different activation functions, plus entropy loss. It's running on 1,000 epochs. I got my training set. This is what it gave me after taking like a minute to type what I typed. I didn't run it, but even if there are errors, who cares? You can easily debug this. You take the error, you feed it back at the GPT, and in no likelihood it will give you the answer. Okay, so I mean, really. And for anybody and for any universities trying to stop it, any university trying to stop this stuff is going to fall behind and they're going to regret it. I mean, there's no point. Okay. What you have to do is the teachers have to be more intelligent on how they do their assessment. And then what you do is you do oral exams, you do in-house exams with paper, and there's all kind of ways you can actually thwart this guy. And you got to ask yourself, are you really trying to teach the students to write? And my answer is, if you're not into humanities, the answer is no. You're teaching, who cares if they can write, if they got something that can write for you? There's no need. Why are we writing? We're only writing because you had no alternatives to communicate. But if something can write for you, that's good enough. But the critical thinking, like was discussed in the panel, that's what's needed and what the AI cannot teach you. Without that, you're nothing. But if you got these tools to write, it's perfectly fine. Okay, so I mean, all the people, 99% of the people in this world don't understand. That's all I can say. Okay, so conclusions. Okay, so all tools produce incredible results if the prompts are well chosen. You have to maximize the number of contexts, the amount of context provided, and that's a skill you can teach to students, by the way. And I should tell you, in the panel, when you were asked what skills would be useful, what was not mentioned is teaching students to ask questions. If the students are able to cheat correctly with ChatGPT, it would imply that they're asking questions, something that most students cannot do. So in their current status, the students are not capable of using ChatGPT to cheat. So that in itself is a skill that would be very useful. Just saying. Okay, so priming is essential. Step-by-step generates high-quality results, and tools will only get better. And so don't judge the tools by what they can do now. You got to judge them by what they're going to do in a couple of years. And you'll still be young at that point. Okay, so it's going to change your life. Okay, that's it.
Very proud of you, Gordon, without any cues. 1 minute early. It's very, very good. Right on time.
So for the pricing, well, I know seems like a per token is very cheap.
Yes.
So did they count the token to be the one passed to the API?
No, the token, okay. The token, when you write your prompt, you're using a certain amount of tokens. And when you get the answer, it's giving you a set of tokens. You got to add both together. So the question that you ask is part of the cost. And I should tell you also that I believe that GPT-4 is 10 times more expensive than ChatGPT. The 0.002 is ChatGPT. GPT-4 is 10 times more or less. And there's even other systems which are more expensive. But all this will become cheaper, I mean, for sure. So.
And if you iterate, I assume you're going to pay multiple times.
Oh, yeah. So right now, for instance, I didn't discuss plugins. But plugins, for those who do not know, let's say you ask a question of ChatGPT, and we're talking about this information, right? Well, now when you got plugins, and you say, for instance, what's the distance? Let's say, what did Macron say to Putin when he went to visit him, or whatever? Okay, and ChatGPT does not know this because it cannot go beyond 2021. It will access a web plugin, go check the web, get answers from Google, and basically process that answer and give you text in a form that you can understand. You could say, give me the result as a 10-year-old or whatever, and you get the result translated into whatever form you can understand. And you can also pass it to Wolfram and then about 20 different other plugins. And it's not available yet to us, but I mean, there are systems out there that are using these plugins right now. And how the cost is calculated, I mean, if you're adding the tokens of all these plugins, the cost would add up. So I don't know what the rules are.
So if I want, let's say, a paper, a full-length paper going to be 12 pages. It's
going to add up, but still be much cheaper than having somebody to do it. I can guarantee that.
It's going to be $200, $1,000. $10. So,
For example, there's a GPT-4 32K. It can handle up to 32,000 tokens. I mean, that's like 50 or 60 pages of content, and that's 6 cents per 1,000 tokens. That's a lot, but as Gordon said, give it 6 months or a year. That's going to be sufficient.
Also, what you do is you write your paper with ChatGPT with the cheap version, and then you modify subsections when you do your research with the expensive version and cut down on your cost. I mean, obviously, you got to be creative, right? And that's what I'm saying. If you use the tools intelligently, they're way beyond what you think. Like, way beyond, believe me. You can do far more than what's been
Did you have more? Sorry. Just, we're going to go here.
Including drawing. It's amazing. Okay.
Gordon, quick question. Thank you. So you made the point that GPT can be creative. You made the point that it can improve code. So I wonder about your opinion about this runaway intelligence that GPT takes its code, optimizes its own code, GPT-5 or 6 or whatever, and then uploads that to... Are you not worried about this?
First of all, to some degree, I am. I also know I cannot do anything about it whatsoever. Even if 50 countries, like 50 stop research, all they need is no creative continuum and wipe this out. So as a consequence, you can't do anything, so you might as well enjoy it. That's mine. No, I mean, want to talk about it. Really dismissed, get the guy's name last. No. Anyway, whatever it is, you do experiments, right? One experiment, and when you write code, make that. And then we basically run experiments, and work, I'm going to keep on the code, I'm going to read the code, I'm going to write some keys, then you're going to run it 10, 20 times, and eventually get the answer. Guy was pointing out that write a chatbot, you make some error. I guess, providing this information, say, okay, I'm going to correct it, I'm going to improve it. But he says, all that's going to happen is that somebody misuses it once, and writes us out, will have the opportunity to correct it. Like the good guys, you want to keep running and keep improving the tools. Bad guys, when you have, that's a point very well taken, and I believe it's correct. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. No, I think I speak loud enough that they can hear me.
Gordon, you've been part of your you've trained a number of generations now of folks that do programming. Going forward, what's your thought as to what's the education going to be like?
So my thought, for instance, is like already right now into the data mining course that I'm doing as a favor to another faculty. Okay, I basically started using ChatGPT, and I basically in my last test I told them they could use it. Not 15%, I just said they could use it, do whatever they want. But of course, I created the questions, and I knew that I had some questions that it cannot do, like doing diagrams, right? But eventually it will do diagrams. So it won't always give the right answer. Eventually it will give the right answer. So the question is, you have to ask secondary questions, and then with the current versions, it's easy to ask secondary questions that it cannot answer. So at the end of the day, it's critical thinking. And I already told the students, you're simply going to make the test more difficult. I mean, write a program in one language, interface it with something in another language, have it create a website, and you got 1 day to do it. Don't give them a week, give them a day. And if they're able to use ChatGPT to cheat in a day, I want to hire this student, right? If the student's capable of doing that, that means I want him to work for my outfit because it means it's capable of doing complicated jobs faster. I mean, I don't see the need to continue the training the way we've always been done. You got to ask yourself, what's the ultimate objective? You want the student to be able to go to work, be creative, generate new stuff, boost up the economy. Does that mean he's got to be able to write? Not necessarily. Pretty simple.
So, I mean, if we need our research assistant to write code and run simulations, now seem like you can create virtual research assistant.
That's right. In fact, Nathan and I are working with somebody outside, a friend of ours, right, for K through 12, and we've been thinking about using ChatGPT to do personalized learning, where the curriculum would be generated on the fly per person, think about this, right? We like to talk about equity and diversity, right? So take two students. Let's take a student who was brought up in a rich family, and let's take a student who was brought up in the savannah in Africa. We want to give them both equal chance, right? And we talk about, okay, now ask yourself the question. You write a program in ChatGPT, a math problem, and then you say to ChatGPT, reformulate the problem, do not change the problem, but reformulate it for somebody who was brought up in a savannah in Africa. And then you say, and rewrite it for the person who was brought up in a rich family. Same problem. The problem will be worded differently. Now you're taking into account the user background, and that's something that we cannot do now. Right?
There's an interesting anecdote. I think that'll answer both of your questions. Very curious as well. There was a student here at FSU, graduated very recently, Gabriel Gomez, now is a researcher at Carnegie Mellon. He just put out a paper maybe 2 weeks ago that demonstrated the following. He strung together multiple large language models. One of them was the planner. Another one was a researcher. Another one was a coder. And then the other one was the experimentalist. And you'd go to the planner and you'd say, hey, synthesize 100 milligrams of aspirin. You just tell that to the planner. And then the planner would go to the researcher and then say, hey, go find me the stoichiometry and the equations and everything that I need to synthesize aspirin. It would get that back. Then it would send that to the programmer to then write code to do the calculations to actually execute them, send that back to the planner. And then the planner would send that to like a wet lab cloud computing environment where it would actually go and conduct the experiments and synthesize 100 milligrams of aspirin, right? So think about that as a research assistant and what you need to teach kids moving forward in the future. I mean, this is just the beginning, and 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, this is going to be ubiquitous, right? So I think, as Gordon says, there's no hiding from it. Any more questions? Oh.
What if it's not aspirin?
Yeah. Yeah. He actually has that in his paper, that as an example, THC, and it learns to synthesize that. And then, he has a whole section about the concerns of it. But that's the point, is it has to be explored. You got to confront both the positive and the negative simultaneously. Yeah. More question. Very, very, very good question. Succinct and to the point.
Are we done?
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Erlebacher.